I really enjoy this phase of production where you have all the things figured out, such as style frames, look development, storyboard, etc. And all you need to do now is shape compositions, play with the camera, reframe every shot, and just complete the storyboard with all the style frames and work on the animation, music edit. So all the experimental work and the brainstorming is done. This is the time to grab a cup of coffee and enjoy the process and just render out some nice visuals. So welcome back to the final chapter of the show title design workshop. This is Ram from Crossmind Studio, and today I will take you through some of more process behind the production of the rest of the shots, which I think should be easy to grasp for you as you have already been through the tough phase we dealt with in the previous chapters. If you have stumbled upon this chapter randomly, please keep in mind this is an ongoing series and this is the final chapter of the series, which is about show title design. So just check the playlist in the description, watch the entire thing in the right order for this to make sense. And also the project files and everything, the bonus stuff is on the Gumroad. So check out that page as well. So here's the file from the previous chapter, what we made during the style frame. So one thing I'm going to do is let me just have a look at the storyboard first. So in the storyboard section, what we have is this frame is what we made during the style frames. So the end frame is this one where the logo arrives. So what we can do now is the first shot, this essentially is the same shot, and actually all of these shots are just reframed version of this one. So but the first shot is quite straightforward. Basically we are just breaking out a silhouette in this one. So it's not going to be a fully lit shot, and all the smoke simulation and bullets won't be here. So this is just a less active shot, same version where we can just see the silhouette of this unit here. So to do that, what I will do is just disable, first let's just disable all the smoke simulations that we don't need, that is just for the last shot. And one more thing I would like to do here is take the camera and just move it out, bring a new collection called cameras, and rename the light collection to lights shot 10. This is the last shot. So now here what I can do is just bring one empty, link all the lights to the empty that we have made. So what I usually do is just keep on making the duplicate of these collections and the cameras and reframe according to each shot. So for the very first shot, let me just enable the preview first. So for the first shot, I'm just going to disable all these front lights and only keep something to just break the silhouette. So let's make a duplicate of this one and let's start deleting things that we don't need. So since all these warm lights are actually coming from the VDB, I mean the fire, the bullet muzzle flash. So in the first shot, we don't need to keep it warm. We can actually make it of the same color, blue. And then we can simply make some lights to highlight some of these chains. I will deal with the VDBs later. There will be some smoke, only the ground smoke in this part. So there you go. You have something to work with for the first shot. So even at this stage, these are revealing too much of the muzzles. So I don't want that. So let's just move this light. So something like this. So similarly for the second shot, what I did was just work on some of these close-ups. Let me just make a duplicate for this collection. So basically here I'm just making unique collection of the lights and camera for every shot. So I find this pretty easy to manage rather than creating new scenes, easier to manage and working on such a small scale. So anyways, so let me just grab the empty for this one. First of all, select the shot to camera and let's reframe this one. So something like this. And here in the depth of field, we can just blur it out. So what I like to do from this point onwards is just select this main empty where all the lights are linked and start tweaking this with the main controller. Let me just bring one empty object here, one simple for the focus. So just doing the very basic things here. So something like this for the second shot. So I just wanted to try out one more option for the second shot. Maybe if we are doing some sort of edit and we just want to use multiple length or two different length for the same shot. So this was the whole process for making style frame. It's basically once you have your entire thing, the main unit, you can if it's a logo based the title, then so this is one of the way you can just simply reverse engineer it and just work on the different compositions, work on the camera and focus on try to find some nice compositions from the different angles of the main unit. So let me just see the storyboard again. So the next shot is we have the top view where all the scopes are visible. Sorry, I think I messed up the camera a bit, but that's okay. I'll just work with that, fix that later. So at the top, we don't have much detail at this moment. So what I can do is maybe the models that we had discussed previously. So fully intact models of the snipers and everything. So I can bring those here. So this composition is fine. I think this composition is fine. Just that the details are missing in the models. So I can keep it for now, work on the details later. So I'll show you the files in the moment for the final shots. First 3 to 4 shots I try to keep very dark. In the middle of the sequence you'll see more reddish and orange tone emerging in, and in the later shots you have more lights coming from the muzzle flashes. And then we have this shot for the handlebar and this for the scope. For the bullet one, for the bullet shots, basically what I did was find something. So let me just reset the position and rotation. So something like this for the bullets, and in the foreground for these animated bullets I added few extra lights, I believe. So in this I didn't want it to defocus the chain in the background too much. Basically there will be some motion and we will be animating this chain. So let me just increase the f-stop. So something like this, I believe, for the shot where bullets were falling. And similarly for the other shot where the bullets are falling on the floor, for that what I did was just bring a temporary surface. Yeah, so something like this for the shot where the bullets are falling on the floor. So we will animate, I will give you the breakdown for the animation later. So this is just a rough planning, and there were a lot of tweaks after this. Once I had the basic camera setup and the light setup, so I went ahead and worked on tweaking everything, the lights and the camera a bit. So something like this for the last shot. And for the handlebar shot, one of these pieces have a handle. So on this handle, I modeled another surface, which was basically a flat version of this one. And I slapped logo on top of that. So let me just tweak the lights. Something like this. And I believe here in the negative parts, I wanted to have something nice which can be used for the animation. In these parts of the frames, I wanted to introduce some sort of motion. So I moved some of these parts so that later machines basically activate. So these muzzles start moving and start taking a stance or something. So like I mentioned before, so in the middle of the sequence where we have after these frames, so these orange frames labeled with orange, so these frames will have slightly more lights like the red LED lights emitting and the muzzle flashes and lights coming from the interface and lasers. In this frame as well, I introduced some orange light in the background, so it's like things are warming up. When working with the style frames, and this does look like we are cheating the style frames, but it's not actually cheating. It's just that as long as you can you don't break the scene in a way that it doesn't connect with the rest of the frames, it's perfectly all right. So in terms of the direction of the light, the language of the kind of shots you're using, as long as you follow all those things, eventually going to fall back together and connect with the rest of the shots. During this phase, you are basically doing everything you can to empower composition as much as possible in terms of thinking of the elements which can be animated in terms of composition, etc. So something like this I had used for the handle. So I'll show you the final files in a moment. For the recoil shot where the bullets basically start firing from these muzzles, what I did was just pulled one of these guns out. Or something like this, where the bullets are shooting out and all we can see is just focus on one particular gun, because I just wanted one shot to have less of an abstract view, even if it comes for just for the 0.5 seconds or 1 second. I wanted the audience to have a proper view, like when the gun is basically firing and the bullets are shooting out. Instead of shooting bullets from all these, it would have been a bit chaotic, and all the muzzles shooting together and focusing on so many muzzles at the same point would have been really difficult to pull off, and it would have been really chaotic. That is why I kept only few muzzles focused on this one. So, and then after that we have a simple bullet trail, and for this I didn't actually make a 3D scene. I just simply rendered the smoke simulation, the bullet trail, the VDB simulation, and this is the final frame that we have already made. So let me just show you the rest of the shots, these two shots, and how these were made. So as I was mentioning, the shot number 3, the top shot, so what I did was basically I took some models, I trimmed out the rest of the scene. So don't worry about the rest of the scene, that is still there in other fights. So here's the logo somewhere, and this is the top part. So instead of those broken models, I brought in all these complete pieces like the snipers and rifles, assault rifles and scopes, kept it here like this. So it's a pretty dense view of all the scopes, and it was pretty obvious that we were talking about guns and scopes. But even in so much of chaos, there is still some order. So all the scopes and the guns are lined horizontally and in one line. So I think it was a good composition. So it was a pretty simple scene, and for the other shot I used something similar. It's just that I only used 3 guns instead of using multiple guns. Let me just bring up the file. So again, the rest of the scene is trimmed out. So the whole point was basically we have so many shots going on. I think we discussed this in the storyboard stage. I try to keep things less monotonous, and not everything is about the dense machines, and few things were a bit refreshing, and like this one was pretty dense shot, this one is pretty dense, and here we have so many guns aligned. So even though this was a close-up, it was still a dense shot. in this view and in other one, yeah, this one, the recoil shot. So in these views I try to make the compositions a bit more relaxed and more focused on what is happening in the frame. The small things are more readable, like the bullets firing out of the muzzle and the red LED turning on and throwing the red light in the composition. So to emphasis on those things, those small things, I had to make the compositions a bit more relaxed, have more breathing space around the objects for things to focus on and make it more readable. So that was the thing. So this was pretty simple shot, and this is one of my favorite shots. So that's about it for the style frames. So let me just show you the style frames, all of the style frames and the different phases. What was the how the style frames looked on different phases. So I think somewhere here, yeah, style frames. Let me just zoom out a bit. So these were the final frames. Let me just show you the first draft before everything. So actually, when I was making the end frame, what we did in the previous chapter, before that I was struggling a bit with the frames. So let me show you the different stages. So if you remember the early stage where I was exploring the logo, and behind that I was trying to add the units. So it was a very slow realization, and there were quite a few attempts to before reaching the final frame. So at this frame you can clearly see I was not quite sure of the design. Even though I had concept sketch, I was trying to see if something else worked better in the 3D, but not exploring quite far away from the original concept. So slowly I'm building up here, and here I was trying to add some sort of a base, but it didn't actually look like a mount. So then I worked with the different model, and also the machines were like quite a few muzzles, and the order and everything, the silhouette was not really looking great. And for the rest of the shots I was just trying to explore how dense or what kind of compositions we can use. So as you can see, these are definitely not working, and all the guns are like pretty tightly stacked together. And later on I just basically discarded all these frames. But even though these were not really used in the final production, but these were like, this is what we built up on, and took plenty of clues from these frames. So, and also there was no consistency in the colors, lights and everything. So this was like a very early sketch, so you can think of it like this, and like scribbling on the doodle. So I was basically scribbling in the 3D. So I just, after the kit bashing, what we did in the previous chapter, I was just trying to explore frames, just sitting with a coffee and trying to figure out things. I was not really trying to achieve anything, just simply was playing with the camera and lights. This definitely didn't work. So then in the second phase, I have what we just did. So these were with the from the final style frame, even though these are not the final frames, but these were coming from the final style frame that we have done. But basically what I just showed you, the process. But even in this stage you can clearly see few things are not working out. The lights are not consistent. So here you can see the red light is at the bottom, and here we have blue, and it's much more revealing. We didn't want it to have so much of focus on the guns and muzzles, and slowly reveal it instead of in the very first frame. And here this frame is way too red, and this frame again was not really looking at impactful frame. I would say like things are pretty loose, the base is missing, the machines don't really look dense. So even though this was an improvement from the previous one, what I did in the very first sketch, even then this was not really quite finished. But I was quite excited to see this. But usually when I have something which I think it's working and it's a pretty good frame or artwork, so I often take a break of few hours away from the screen and then come back, and then you start seeing all the problems with the concept and the frames, whatever you're creating. So after taking a break, visiting the same artwork the next day, I realized this is definitely not working and requires some more work. So that is when we arrived at this final frame, which is pretty heavy. The base, the mount is working perfect with this one, and we have these secondary details like the chains and the pipes going on. And the overall composition, we made it diagonal, just like we discussed in the previous chapters, coming from the inspiration. Yeah, this lockdown and the metal slug frame, so the pointed frame in the one direction. So that's exactly what we tried to do here. It was quite fun, and it was slow build up. At every stage there was a realization, like what needs to be done, what needs to be improved. So in these final frames you can see there is a color consistency. On the left we have blue light, the ambient light, and in the other corner we have the red light, just like what we discussed in the color palette section in the previous chapter. So we have a one side is completely blue and other side is completely red, so high contrast images, just like this one and this one. So same thing, in all these frames we have a hint of red, and then the rest of the things are blue. And in the center of the sequence we slowly see these warm colors emerging in, as we start seeing those muzzle flashes and things start to heat up. So here we have these nice warm color emerging in, and in the final reveal we have everything, all the lights working together to reveal the logo. So these were all the style frames, and I hope you get the process and basically the point I'm trying to convey. So after this point onwards, what I did was first of all clean up the files. As you can see here or in the previous files that I have opened, like this one, the handlebar and everything. So what I did was basically only keep the stuff that I need and just delete everything else. So I didn't want anything else to interfere with the view or with the animation. If there was something significant which is maybe casting a shadow on the object or affecting the light, I only kept those, like this one, only the main logo, and started deleting the rest of the stuff. But before starting the animation, there is one more thing I usually like to do. So in this case I made a very basic animatic. Usually it's a pretty detailed animatic, but in this case what I did was just simply took the panels from the storyboard and aligned those things with the audio that I have. So here's an animatic I'm going to play. So as you can see here, even though these are not really final shots, what this does is before starting the animation, it gives you a few things to start with. One is the duration of the shot. So that is really important. So for each shot, I had a fixed duration from this point of view, but I always keep some extra buffer even after this point. And also very important thing, this also helped in finding the details about what needs to be animated. So as you can hear, the audio does give some clue, the transitions in the audio, the big beats in the audio, the clicks and all those noises. So I started imagining the motion of the machines in those audios. So in this part, when the clicks happen, I animated the muzzles which were deactivated before. So those muzzles start popping out and there's a slight twist and pull out action happening in the muzzles. Again, in this point, we have a very obvious clue from coming from the music that the things got more intense. So this was a good point for scope shots, or to introduce the red light, which is basically we are approaching the danger zone. So this was another great clue. And after this point, so this drop I was talking about in the storyboard section, this was a great shot to bring one of the slow motion shots we had discussed in the storyboard, where the bullets are falling before revealing the final, where the bullets are shooting out of the muzzles. This was a great way to introduce one more teasing shot of the slow motion bullets falling in this music drop. And also here we have one logo reveal of the crossmind. So this was a pretty good sound, and the movement of the machine, the sound kind of had a sense of where things are locking and mounting. So if you can hear it. So it was like locking things up. So these were a very few interesting things I figured out after making the basic animatic. So even though these are such simple frames, so at this point it was pretty clear that whatever I'm making, it's making sense, and I'm not actually shooting in the dark. So even with such simple sketches and with such simple audio and editing, so this actually brought much more clarity. So this is for the every project, it's not just for this one. So this brought much more clarity about whatever I had planned for this sequence, how I was visualizing it in my head. All that is working. After this point, I basically started working on the animation for every shot, and the animations were pretty simple. Let me just show you the animations, and then I will discuss a few specific shots. So here I'm using Milanote. If you guys are not aware, if you have seen the previous videos, this is pretty obvious. So for every shot, I have a rendered version here. So let me just discuss the few basic shots which don't really need much explaining, and then we are going to discuss a few of the simulation parts. So the first shot here, let's see if I can zoom in further. So the first shot, you can see there isn't any animation happening. The whole unit is standing still there, and the bullets doesn't have the chains ammo or nothing have motion. Basically anything moving is quite ambient. The smoke, the lights, those are the things which are basically adding motion to the camera here. So I have a ground smoke going on, very simple simulation coming from the VDBs I had pre-prepared from the month of the simulations. Yeah, so we basically start with a pretty dark frame, and even though we have very little lights, instead of keeping all the lights enabled all the time, what I did was animate things in and out, switch it on and off the emission. So here you can see on the left we don't have any emission at this point. In the start we have a very little clue of what is going on. It just gives you an surface to sort of see the motion of the camera. Slowly we start seeing more lights, like here the red light and the top which is falling on this scope, and then after that we have more lights emerging in the left. So all those lights are the intensity I animated, and then few lights are traveling from the left to right. You can see here. Yeah, this light traveling, and instead of revealing things with a static light, this was a pretty interesting thing to add here. It also gives a motion in the frame. So simple things, it's just that when few simple things coming together are more valuable here. And then in the second shot we have the shift of the focus. So at the start we have everything out of the focus, and again the lights are not really showing up any of the information in the frame in the foreground. And as the camera, the focus shifts on these objects, there's a pretty obvious silhouette of the muzzle here, exactly what we discussed in the previous chapter. So one of these for the first few frames we had discussed to keep this model because it looked pretty obvious that it's about guns, and this shape will stand out in the dark. And in the background I have ambient, the same the VDB simulation, the smoke adding up some secondary motion. I hope you can see it. For those who have downloaded the files from the Gumroad or Patreon or the members of this channel, they can access these boards and revisit any of the things that I'm showing here in this presentation. Then in the third frame, the same thing happening, the shift of the focus, pretty simple frame. The most interesting part about this frame was the composition and the details in the models, and that's about it. There's nothing animated here. So this frame, I'll just show you the file for this frame. So what's happening in this frame is at the start we have the focus on the background machine, the muzzle, where the same action happening, whatever we have here, these muzzles popping out. So the same thing happening here as well. But as soon as this thing becomes very obvious, the camera shifts to the main logo, and in the logo we have some transparency with the Musgrave texture going on. So this object using the main logo that you have seen on this channel, and then there is a noise texture which is helping create this transition. So this is the main shader, which is pretty dark, and then this one is the glossy shader. In the final reveal, we have the logo is basically much more glossier. That's all. So it's a pretty simple shader. There's nothing much here to explain. And as far as the animation goes, the animation in this scene is pretty simple. So what's happening is sort of like unlocking, shifting, and locking things again. So that kind of animation. So at the start we have this thing is it's not really logical. I'm not quite sure how the machines work in real life. I didn't do much research in the given amount of time for this presentation, so pardon me if something is really off the chart. So yeah, this is the motion. After a few of these muzzles pop out, you can see that this main unit, it's like sort of unlocking, going back. So this is sort of unlocking action and then locking back again. So pretty simple animation, but for my scene, that is what I didn't want to create too much noise in the scene, and the logo was important. The logo needed to be in the focus. So I try to keep animation more readable in these parts, in the foreground and background, but not the main handle. So this part is pretty much still in the whole duration, but the background and foreground is moving. So animations are pretty simple, the rotation, movement, and nothing else, nothing complex is going on. And I'm pretty sure if you've seen the beginners series or other tutorials on this channel, I'm pretty sure you can you have the knowledge of how to animate things in 3D. Similarly, we have this shot, and this is again pretty simple, and here the same thing is happening. The material is there are two materials. One is the emission shader using this texture, the other one is the simple gun material. So there's a simple transition going on between the material. Pretty simple. And the smoke simulation is in these parts. The background was looking pretty flat, and thinking from the other shots point of view, where we have all the muzzles and the rest of the body. So in the main scene we have the smoke at the ground, and some of that smoke is lifting up. So I thought maybe some of that smoke should be visible in these parts as well, and it could be a bit of a jump in the visual if we leave the smoke out of these frames completely. So that's why I kept some of the smoke here. So it's a pretty simple VDB. And for lights, I have a simple emission with the mix shader. In the mix, I have this red light texture, which is I think already there in the gun model I downloaded from the Sketchfab. The links I will leave in the boards. And also I think this is the value which I animate. And also I believe there is a light here somewhere, sort of red color going on. So the red texture itself was not really enough. So I just wanted the red color, these lasers to fall on the other surfaces like this one. So I added some external lights with the red color. And then for these shots, I basically used the very simple RBD simulation. So for the shot where the bullets are falling on the ground, what I did was a very basic simulation with the help of the default simulator. So let me just get rid of this one. This is just for the visual. The main floor is just for the visual, and this is what we're going to use for the simulation. I'm just going to make it a very quick one. Made a few copies and then transform these into random interaction. And then select all of these, object, quick effect, rigid body, add active, and then I believe there is some collision margin or something. So in the rigid body world, just increase the solver substeps to something around 50 or something, and then the ground plane could have a rigid body passive. So these things are going to fall like this, and once these settle on the ground, all you can do is just select all of these and just type rigid body, apply transformation, and then go to the object, rigid body, remove. So now that placement from the simulation is still there in these. Now if you apply a rigid body again, open quick effect, rigid body add active. Now if you run the simulation, these are going to just rest on the ground and just have a very little motion in it. And then you can add more bullets, and these could have a very slow motion sort of let's say 0.2 or something speed, and all of these could have a bounciness, more surface response bounciness, so the floor could be more bouncy. Yeah, so something like this I used. Pretty simple simulation, and a few more tweaks are required, but I hope you get the point. So again, there's a dedicated series for this one, so check that out in the playlist section. So this is what I used in so once the simulation was done, I simply baked everything and removed the ground plane and brought in this visual plane. And then for these shots I used RBD simulation for this one and the last one. After this, the last shot, there is another shot where the bullets are falling on the floor. So for that I used simple RBD, the rigid body simulations. Let me just show you the files. No, sorry, my bad. Actually for this shot I didn't use any simulation. So these are hand animated bullets. So simple transformation going on. And all of these bullets have a sort of fluid smoke simulation going on. So these surfaces, and there are small icospheres inside these bullets which are linked with these. So those are throwing some emitting some smoke. So I didn't want the smoke to only come out of the outer surfaces. So for the internal surfaces, for that I used these icospheres to emit the smoke. And then the ground sort of effector for the smoke collision. And I believe it's a pretty low resolution smoke simulation. Let me see, it's only the 64 resolution, so the visibility is very low. That's why I didn't actually spend much of the resolution. Only it's just that on top of the 64 resolution I used uprest noise factor, and that is what the small details are coming out from. And in the background we have the chain, which is a simple path deform, what we made in the previous chapter. So this thing is also animated in the x direction, and this is actually moving pretty slow, so something in line with the falling bullets here. For this last shot, yeah, for this I believe I used rigid body simulation. For this shot I made one simple manual animation. So let me just show you this file. So this is a pretty simple animation. Again, the file is cropped, the rest of the things were deleted. So this particular bullet here, yeah, let me just hide all these VDBs. So this is manually animated. You can see what's happening here is we have this the thing from where the bullets eject, the empty shells. The outer whatever is blocking it sort of moves back, the bullet comes out, and then the same action repeats. So I watched some of the slow motion videos from the internet. It's pretty easy to find on the YouTube. Then there are few smoke simulations, the same VDBs what I used for the rest of the simulations, like the muzzle and all. So since this was such a quick shot, so I used the same VDB inside this chamber. The smoke really doesn't really make sense, but it's just to add sort of motion in the view. So this is just not even 1 second, less than 1 second, this shot. And then there is a final reveal. In this one we have all the VDBs working together, and the bullets shooting out, and animated bullets here. Yeah, so in this shot, again in the main body, if you can see, it's following similar kind of language what we discussed in the handlebar logo reveal shot. Even though these feel random, but it's still following some sort of a mechanical language, and not all the parts are moving at the very same time. There is sort of a follow through and offset going on. So if you observe in this part, there is sort of a delay, the main body and the muzzles. So there is a slight delay in the animation, and for that, it's let me just show you how it's done. So just move it in the y direction, move it and bring it back in the y direction. So we have this motion for both. So let's bring the same animation here and then do one offset. Just shift the animations. Sorry, I think it's linked, so let me just clear the parent. Yeah, something like this. So slight delay basically, and this is what is going on in all the muzzles. But the main thing was it's just that it's sort of a one shock wave. So it starts from here, then it travels here, and then we see some motion in this part. So if you observe closely, you might would see it. So it starts here, then these parts move, and then the center parts move. But there is a sort of a force, the order which this machine is following. So if you watch some of the videos in the slow motion on the YouTube, I think there is a dedicated channel for the slow motion. So when the guns move in the slow motion, so after the main receiver and this top clip, it shoots the bullet, then it falls back, and when it impacts with the rest of the main body, when it falls back, comes back in the resets in the position, that is where the whole body of the gun moves, and you have this sort of the recoil motion. So again, that is a part of research that we have already discussed in the previous chapters. So I had quite fun trying to understand the motion of the gun, even though this is such a pretty simple example, but without this kind of motion it wouldn't have looked nice. And this is just a simple VDB simulation, straight flat view, nothing else. And this is again pretty simple, nothing much going on, quite fast. And for these frames, for this one and this one, you can see pretty much all the bullets and the things are blurring out. So I rendered out the sequences from the Blender itself with a lot of motion blur. That was the only way to reveal these bullets moving out in such fast motion. So pardon some of the errors here. I haven't really finished the entire thing quite well, but I hope for this presentation this is enough. If you have any difficulties understanding the simulations in Blender, such as Manta flow simulation or the rigid body simulations, so there are a few playlists in the homepage itself. So here you can see the introduction to Manta flow. This will help you understand the smoke and liquid simulations, and there is rigid body dynamic solver simulations. So these are for the basic rigid body simulations, how to make fractures and move things in with the physical solvers. So even though the Blender have a pretty basic rigid body simulations functionality, but for our purpose I think this should be enough, and you can create some quite interesting examples with that, as seen as in this series. So do check out the playlist section. Now about the smoke and muzzle simulation, so I'll just give you a breakdown of a pretty simple setup here. So in here we have one simple sort of cylindrical shape like a gun barrel. So that is what I used as a collision object in the effector. Within this we have let me just hide this. Within this there is this emitter which is sort of moving in this direction. So this is the main source of emission, and the other one is this emitter which is creating a burst of particles. So basically what's happening is inside the cylinder I have one emission source, and so I wanted this smoke to sort of have a directional burst for this to come out with a force. So within this emission, if you see in the properties of the Manta flow, there is a plenty of source velocity going on. So this object is pushing the whole smoke and fire with a lot of velocity and pushing it out of the barrel. And the other one, this one here, is just creating a few bursts of particles, which is basically making this shape here. And the whole simulation, the smoke domain. So these are the settings. It's running on the 300 subdivisions, divisions, and there is a noise uppress of 2. Other than the velocity and the source emission going on here, I have this bullet, which is it doesn't have any density or initial temperature. I made it as an inflow object so that around these frames, this is basically passing through this simulation. It carries smoke with itself and sort of creates this trail which you see here. So I will be leaving these files on the Gumroad as well, along with the BDB simulations. The open files will be there, and the other files, which is sort of a variation of the same thing. So similarly in this file, it's kind of exact same setup. It's just that this one is, the speed is quite slower. So the time scale you can see here 0.02. So the time scale is animated. So till this frame 14, you can see the time scale is 0.2, and further it gets slower. So as you might have noticed in the sequence when the bullets shoot out, so everything kind of gets slower towards the end where we see the final logo. So feel free to explore these files if you want to study it further. If you are really new to Monthaflow, I would suggest that you watch the basics. So that's all there is to it. And even though these are not really the perfect simulations, but for our purpose, I think these worked quite well. So I basically made quite a few variations. So in some of these, I try to adjust the speed of the particles, try different combinations of the speed and the particles burst and velocity. So made quite a few variations out of it. But these are all fast simulations, and the other ones are slower. And about the ground simulations, so these are a few very simple simulations with just the basic geometry. Like I made a few deformed cubes and with the basic turbulence, just like what we discussed in the very first chapter of the Monthaflow series. Now about the rendering, most of these sequences were rendered on a pretty medium resolution samples. So around 3 to 500 is what the most of the shots were rendered on. If you can afford, you can go beyond that. So some of the grains issue which I had in few of the shots, those can be avoided. But for the internet presentation, and I just wanted to upload it on the YouTube, so I couldn't afford to spend much time on the renders here. For every frame, for each frame in 3070, it took around 3 to 5 minutes on a frame. The samples ranging from 300 to 500 frames, 300 to 500 samples, and that's it. Everything else is on the default. So for the denoiser, I'm using I believe open image denoiser. So for all the shots, since I was using the depth of field and the motion blur from within the blender itself, I didn't actually render the passes. So none of the passes were rendered here, so not even the mist pass. So I think I was quite careful about the lights and the colors, so I didn't want it to leave anything for the post-production. Now let's talk about the edit a bit. So even though there isn't much to talk about this, so since we already made one animatic and the sequence is kind of figured out already, but a few things which you can do, few things you can keep in mind when editing is that so for me it's sometimes I have the sound figured out and the sequence is planned according to the sound. And just like what I suggested in the very first chapter, the second chapter about in the ideation section, where we were working with a demo sound sample and just to visualize the sequence. So that is the most effective way I find for something of this scale. So obviously that wouldn't be the case for the bigger production. So I think it's sort of a sound and the visual needs to run parallel. So you can't really, it's really difficult to find the perfect sound which goes really well with your edit and you just slap it on top of the entire thing and it works. It's always going to be completely off, so it's not going to match with the beat and everything. So sometimes I have the sound figured out and the sequence is planned according to the sound, and sometimes the sequence is figured out but the sound is a bit off. So either edit the sound a bit or retime the sequence according to the sound and make some adjustments. So those, that is not the ideal, but in some cases that works. So few things to keep in mind to keep your edit seamless is to keep the motion sort of stitched, and take hint from the previous frame and try to carry forward the same motion. So if the, let me just bring up the style frames. Sorry, yeah, let's go with this one. So if the lights are traveling and have sort of reached a certain point, then in the next shot you can't really throw in a random position, move the light anywhere you want. So try to keep the motion and sort of a placement of the things connected. So in the edit, these are two essential things that you try to keep things connected, whether it's motion, whether it's the direction of the lights or the placement of the things. So if you reposition things which are not really matching up with the rest of the frames, then the things are not really going to connect in the sequence. So some things would feel a bit off. So just try to balance things out. And the second thing is sound. Now think of it like this. So we are composing everything together, the visual composition and the audio composition, color composition, etc. So putting together a music piece into a nice composition in itself is a pretty challenging task. So it's like half of the work. Whatever you're seeing on the screen, half of that is visual and the rest of the half is the sound. Somebody else have already spent so much time to put so much into great composition of the sound. So that's why working parallel with the sound helps a lot, especially for small scale projects such as idents or intro sequences. So if you don't have a sound planned from or in the library, you can always in your company or whatever design studio you're working with, you can sit with the sound designer. Maybe he can draft some initial set one initial tone for the sound, or you can just download the sound from the libraries which are online, and just at least try to find a tone for the sound. So just like what we discussed in the previous chapter, so we had downloaded one of the sample music just to visualize the initial concept, and then in the final clip we are using something on the similar tone. I'm not going to play that sound, so YouTube is basically giving me some content copyright claim whenever I play that sound, so just forget about it. So basically sound, whatever the music pieces you can take advantage of. And so if you can read the graph of the music, the intensity of it, and plan your visual accordingly, if you can embed the music in your work in a way that it extends your work and becomes one with it, then the experience becomes more immersive, you can say. So when every visual sits right on the beat, when correct visual is chosen for the kind of progression there is going on in the audio track, then the outcome is going to sort of carry your visual works with it. It also helps to think of a word for the edit which sums up your edit, like velocity, powerful, jumpy, dynamic, calm, distorted. So try to set one sort of a attribute or a language for it, what kind of edit you are looking for. So impactful, powerful, if you remember in the early boards we had written down few of the keywords like craft, energetic, epic. I believe it was in a brainstorming session: heavy, impact, metallic, loaded, powerful, upbeat. So these visual attributes we were trying to, so these also help in the edit as well. So that's about it for this series, and I really hope this was helpful. And I'm pretty sure some of you might have more questions, and some of you might be expecting more, like this is not a tutorial. Like I said in the very first chapter, this is not a tutorial, this is more like a we are discussing a process behind the creating everything and the design process, and we are not really getting into the small bits of how to create a key, animation key. We have done that in the previous tutorial sections. If you're new to Blender, then you can check out this playlist, which is about the very basics of the Blender. And if you are new to the rigid body and everything, then you can check out the other playlist. There are plenty of playlists for you to get started with the Blender and the other aspects which we had discussed in this workshop, which you might not be familiar with, especially this one, which is CGI for the product advertisement. This is also on the similar line, and this is coming from the actual commercial project. I really hope you find it useful. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and if you are interested in the project files, do check out the link in the description and in the pinned comment. And all the project files from this entire series are there on the Gumroad, and there are a few more bonus things which you can take advantage of, like the VDB simulations which I used, the muzzle smoke simulations, so those are there as well. And also you can access all the boards, so all the resources, all the brainstorming sessions, sketches, mood boards, color palette, storyboard, the animatic, everything is there. So just in case if you are like sort of following the similar kind of process for the first time and you just want to revisit a few things, just leave your comments in the comment section. If you have any doubts, or if you have a board which you're making in the Milanote, you can always click on the share and make a link out of it, shareable link like a public board, or if you want to make it private with the password, you can do that if you have a process which you want to share with me. I'll see you guys in the next chapter, next video, and which is about EndNote, and I will add a few tips and tricks and few more thoughts in the just to conclude this series. Yeah, so just stay tuned, subscribe if you're new to this channel, and check out the playlist sections. I'll see you guys later. Take care. Bye. Bye.